At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mary Mucci, Program Manager for Microsoft Innovative Schools Program. Mary, you now have the floor.
Thanks a lot, Sydney. Good morning, good evening to everyone, and welcome to this virtual university, thinking about education differently. Before we get started, I just want to have a quick announcement. As many of you know, we are going to be launching the application for the Innovative Schools Program, and this year we will be launching an application for the mentor schools. We'll be discontinuing the Pathfinder program, and so this application will now be launched on May 2nd, and the information will be available on the Partners in Learning Network around that same time. I will be sending out some information sheets to all of you over the next week so that you have an update about the new program and how the new structure of the Innovative Schools Program will be rolled out this year. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that applications will be available be launched on May 2nd, and you have till August 31st to turn those applications in. And so I want you to encourage the people in your community and schools in your community who you think would be good mentor schools. We also have other levels in the program where they can get involved. We have an Innovative Schools Program as well, so that they could start getting involved and really thinking about innovative teaching and learning in their schools. So anyhow, you'll hear more over the next week or so about this, the launch and what is going on. So anyhow, I just wanted to pass that on and just to make sure that you also tell the other schools in your community. So what I'd like to do today is introduce you to Chris Geary, who would be speaking to us today about some great new research that has been going on and about the issue of recognizing non-cognitive skills and they are just as important as cognitive skills, and that schools should really be paying attention to this and really thinking about how they're going to address these issues and really think about how to strengthen these skills of students today. So many of you know Chris Geary. He has been with the program since the inception in 2006, and he's been an advisor and a coach. He has, up until 2012, he was a high school principal and has built 3 incredibly innovative schools, and many of you have been there to New Line Learning in Cornwallis. And those are the schools that he spent a lot of time in, and really incredible models of innovative teaching and learning. And right now he currently has a company called the Skills Lab that he works on today, and he works with a lot of global education projects. And he is available to you following this call to answer any questions that you have regarding this topic and this research. And if you want any more details, he said he'd be happy to talk to you about it. So Chris, thank you for your time. Chris is in Thailand on vacation, and he has offered to do this virtual university for us. So thank you very much, Chris. And I just want to turn everything over to you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. It's slightly bizarre sitting in a hotel room in Phuket it's about 10 past 8 at night talking to you all around the world, because normally if I was doing this I'd be kind of at home, but I'm not anyway. So well, thanks for dropping by, as they say, and this is about kind of think about education differently. Now the slide set is deliberate in that there's lots of words in there, right? Normally I've got I do this presentation in front of people, I use lots of pictures and I talk, but I thought tonight, if you want to read this stuff, you need something where you can look back and not just look at a picture and think, what was that about, but you can read what it is I'm actually saying. So I'm going to go through some of this stuff now and try and explain what all this is about. So the agenda tonight is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the background to this? What are these words, skills, character, and personality? What do they mean? What are they different in some way? What can we do? And then something about school culture and something about the next steps. And this is very brief. Normally this would take a lot longer to go through. So as Mary said, if you want to know more, just contact me. You can look at the company's website, theskillslab.co.uk, or contact me. My email is simply chris@theskillslab.com. I should have put it on the agenda, but I didn't. But anyway, chris@theskillslab.com will find me, and I'm happy to answer your questions if we get more
Chris,
information.
I'll put all your information in the shared notes, okay, so everybody can find it there.
That's fine. Okay, so off we go with what is the problem. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? Well, I suppose the first thing is, what exactly is school for? You know, we all kind of think, well, you know, we know what school's for, but we don't spend a lot of time kind of considering that. And, you know, considering the second question, which is, well, what is life about? And in recent years, I suppose, since the collapse of the world economies in 2008, people have begun to think about, well, what kind of planet do we want to build here? What's important? How do we measure what's important? How do we get that through to our school system? Is it just about exam performance? Is that all there is to life? Because in the UK we have about 1 million students ex-students between the age of 16 and 24, many of whom have pretty good exam results now, but they don't have life skills. They don't seem to be able to get jobs. And the economy has created about 1 million jobs since the global downturn. So there are jobs around, but these people don't seem to be able to get those jobs. So there's a kind of conversation about, well, skills are now just as critical to jobs as anything else, and exams kind of distinguish between different groups of students, but it's the skills they bring to the job that employers are most interested with. And also, in terms of the kind of longer aspect of issues about life, you know, it's the kinds of abilities you've got to survive long term that really matter. And a long time ago, maybe 100 years ago, you know, teaching was about being concerned with these kinds of skills, being concerned with character, being concerned with the kinds of people we help to enter our society. And in many, many places around the world, as you will know, in recent years, we've become obsessed with simply looking at exam performance and saying that's all that matters. So it's not just technical skills which are important, but social and self-management skills are increasingly important, particularly in a world where we work in different ways. It's no longer a factory model. It's it's a world where service industries work with people to create wealth, and that demands a different kind of attitude. But how does the school system kind of reflect that? So the book, which recently kind of pulled all this together, I suppose the work has been going on now for about a decade behind the scenes, is this book, an American book by Paul Tough called How Children Succeed. And what he said was, you know, character skills are really important. He noted, this was in the context of the United States, he noted the fact that America has very low college completion rates. And it's in terms of the OECD countries, it's next to bottom. Italy has got the worst college completion rates, and then comes America. A little above is the UK, where we used to send a lot of students to university, and the less academic universities had very high dropout rates. So these tended to attract people who'd got marginal exam results, where students went there and they dropped out in droves. And Tufte also looked at the KIPP schools, the Knowledge is Power schools, which you may have heard about in the United States, which were taking poor children from the street and through quite tough regimes in school. They were enabling the students to get very good academic scores, which got them all, I mean all of them, into university. But the dropout rate proved to be 88%. So only 12 out of 100 students who had these academic scores were able to actually continue at university and get a degree. So as a model of social mobility, which have been looked at in many countries, people thought, well, giving poor people money is expensive. So what if we could give poor people great schools? Then the poor people will go to university. They get, from university, they get university-type jobs, and then basically they would no longer be poor, so we wouldn't have a problem. So all we've got to do is find some means of teaching children from poor backgrounds to get good qualifications and go to university. But this research that Tough was on about proves that was not the case. Actually, they weren't successful. And KIPP is now rethinking its whole program to actually realize that, you know, going to college demands more than just having certain qualifications. It demands certain skills. So when you sit in a classroom where a teacher is in charge, you are directed to do things. But when you sit in a college where there is nobody's really in charge, you have to direct yourself. If you don't have those skills, you tend to fall apart and you drop out. So the second group of children that Tough began to talk about in his book is children from adverse childhood experiences. That is, children who suffer from poor parenting. And the more we learn about poor parenting, the more we realize that parenting is the critical aspect, really, of which we knew, but this is, I guess, recent research is telling us, critical aspect of child development. If you've got poor parenting, you are unlikely to develop the kinds of skills you need to survive as a human being and thrive, but also to survive in terms of the school system and to do well academically. So what Tough began to suggest a lot, but he pulled a lot of other research together, was that non-cognitive skills, these soft skills, as James Heckman, a Nobel laureate at the University of Chicago, has been talking about this for a long time, has suggested, these skills are actually critical to success in terms of academic success, but also lifelong success. But we don't tend to focus on these skills in school, so the question is, well, how? So, moving on, the implications for us that many places similar to the US have this obsession with exam performance. There is a limit to how far schools can simply improve teaching to improve exam performance. So if we could improve pupil motivation and work ethic, we should improve results. But also, from a moral point of view, we might actually turn out people who are better suited to live in society today and to take their place as active citizens. So we might actually be doing something good for people beyond simply giving them academic success. So cognitive success, key idea here, is driven by non-cognitive skills. And if you think about it, it's those less able children who just kind of carried on trying hard and actually succeeded. Those are the kinds of children, those are the kinds of the skills which we need to kind of be pushing forward. And the question is, well, why can't we get more children to have that kind of drive and ensure that they are successful? So, well, what is this? This is skills, character, or personality. And there's a lot of confusion over all this. So we're trying to explain the difference. And the first word that comes up in this conversation is really about the word character. And whatever language you speak, there will be a word for this. And it really, in English, it relates to an 18th and 19th century concept. I'm not going to read through all this, but it's really a moral judgment about you, whether you are of good character. So as such, a moral judgment about character is quite subjective, and it can be driven by context. So I'm going to give you an example. He goes to church, he seems pleasant, therefore he must be a good character. So if you read 19th century English literature, or just letters from people in the 19th and 18th centuries, their kind of obsession with character, it's like this one thing you have, which you hang on to. This is the piece, the reality of you which you present to the world. But there are other words today which are more modern. So personality is something rather different. It's something rather more complex. It might suggest that there's a psychological background to understanding a person, and that there may be shades of difference in terms of who you are with different people reflects your personality. It's not something which is the same. A modern concept tracing its origin back to Freud, and Freud suggested that the inner recesses of the self, what happens in the mind, were capable of scientific understanding and interpretation. So people are no longer seen as random entities, but rather product of experiences which could be understood and where necessary changed. So in the 18th century, people would be moody, and the explanation was, well, he's just like that. But in the 21st century, or 20th century, people would try and apply a psychological understanding to that and say, well, there are aspects of his personality which at times he feels there are difficulties and he behaves in this way, other times he behaves in different ways. So it's a more modern understanding. And personality theory shapes expectations by the use of standard measurements, like some of you may have heard of this, the Big Five. So this has come out of America, and it kind of dominates a large part of global thinking about what personality is. So it's about a kind of openness to experience, the ability to not say, well, I don't want to try that food. I don't think I'd like it. I don't want to go to that place. I don't think I'd like it. But say, I'll try it. Conscientiousness is the second one. What does that mean? Well, it means really kind of sticking at stuff, being hardworking. We can measure aspects of that. Extroversion, well, being able to get your idea across is important. So being not simply caught up in yourself, an introvert, but being slightly extrovert is helpful. Agreeableness. And agreeableness is, when you meet somebody, the ability to say, oh, hi, and get along with them. Not to pick a fight with them. And again, if you go back to people in the 18th or 17th centuries, it's quite common when you meet somebody for them to have a fight together, for no particular reason. So rules of etiquette hadn't developed this idea that, when you meet people, you try and find some common ground, and you're agreeable with them. You don't annoy one another. And neuroticism is a sense in which you are slightly concerned about your behaviours. So you kind of measure yourself to a degree, but not overly so. So those ideas, which together you see they form the word ocean: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, have helped shape an understanding of what the modern personality might be. And this kind of informs us about, well, how do we begin to develop people along these lines, if these are the lines for getting along with people in today's society? So what does literature tell us about all of this? Well, in terms of what happens to people, this is a study by somebody called Gene Smith, asked college students to rate their peers on a 42 personality traits. And these 5 general themes are identified: agreeableness, extroversion, work with tenacity, emotionality, ability to show your emotions, and helpfulness. But the issue of work conscientiousness was 3 times more successful in predicting post-high school success than any other factor. So those people that are conscientious, work hard, work at things, tend to do well. They don't have to be brilliant. They don't have to be really intelligent. It's just the fact that they work hard at things means that they are successful. And it's a bit like the tortoise and the hare. You know, these are the tortoises. These are people who just slowly keep going. And we've all known academic high flyers who are like hares and they're gone. And you wonder, well, what happens to them later in life? Are they really successful long term? Whereas these people who are conscientious tend to be successful in the long term. So the question is, how on earth do you teach that to people? How do you kind of do that? And we'll get to that in a bit. Angela Duckworth has been pretty significant at the University of Pennsylvania, and in the past decade she's brought out a book on grit, which you can download from Amazon or buy from Amazon. Quite interesting. I mean, she takes the idea of grit from the film True Grit, which was originally a John Wayne film back in 1969, I think, but it was remade 2 or 3 years ago. And it's about perseverance against the odds, as opposed to instant gratification. And many of the students we deal with, particularly those from poor backgrounds, grow up in a world of instant gratification where if there's 4 people sitting down to breakfast and there's only 2 bananas, you know, you need to kind of grab the banana because otherwise you're not going to get anything. So it's about, in a way, and I'm not saying it's right, but in a way it is about take what you can now, because there may not be an opportunity to have that experience again because resources are limited. So someone within that context who has perseverance is quite unusual. To actually keep going and maybe to deny yourself the instant gratification of the banana, thinking, well, actually, you know, there are other things which are more important. So and she builds on the work of Jill Twenge, another academic, who argued that 1990s students had much higher self-esteem than earlier generations. This is really quite an interesting study because it found that, this chimes with me because I'm 58 years old and I went to university about 40 years ago, and we had pretty low self-esteem when we went to university. We didn't feel we were great, and we were always kind of looking over our shoulders and worried about other people. But current generations, since the 90s, people have got huge self-esteem. They're really confident. They're confident about who they are and what they can do. In fact, they're overly confident, and this doesn't help them realize that, you know, you have to try and you have to work very hard to achieve something. So we've grown up with a generation of parenting which has actually given children confidence, and this may change culture to culture, but I think there is a global phenomenon where parenting has, you know, taken children and tried to encourage them to become more confident, and this in many ways has actually has not helped, I should say, in terms of the development of grit and perseverance. So Twenge calls this a cotton candy sense of self with no basis in reality. So people tend to believe things about themselves which are not true. And you see in Anglo-American culture in particular, children have an idea that they will become pop stars, and or they'll become via programs like the X Factor, which interestingly is being exported around the world. When I was in China recently, they have a very similar program there, and they're encouraging similar kinds of belief, as in, you can become famous and you don't necessarily need to do anything other than just marry someone who's rich, and that's fine. So what Twenge is arguing for is that self-control is more important than self-esteem. And Martin Seligman, who was another huge influence in this area, who actually was who worked and taught Duckworth at the University of Pennsylvania, in his book The Optimistic Child, talks about, well, children need to fail. They need to feel sad, anxious, and angry. When they encounter obstacles, if we leap in to bolster self-esteem, we make it harder for them to achieve mastery. And that's at the other side, saying, well, if you never experience these states of mind, how are you going to learn from it? Well, perhaps. But, moving on, the question then is, well, why are some children more resilient than others? Why is it that some children kind of stick at stuff and are successful, and they're very similar to other children who don't bother and are not successful? So why is that? So Gomez, back in the 90s, tried to analyze this and said, well, characteristics like temperament, cognitive skills, and positive responsiveness to others were important. And also, this is not surprising, if you come from a family marked by warmth, coherence, and structure, you are more likely to be resilient than if you come from a family where the parents simply don't care. And if there is some sort of external support, as in the availability of external support to help you, then you're more likely to be resilient, to overcome difficulties, and to keep going. Because if you think about it, growing up, children experience setbacks, and many of them give up. So we're interested in how do we help those children who give up actually keep going. And that's this whole issue of how we teach children grit. Another project, 1993, competence project, University of Minnesota, looked at resilience and found connections to competent and caring adults. Other studies have found that resilient young people may opt to break away from a parent who may judge to be damaging. Cognitive and self-regulation skills and positive views of self, and the motivation to be effective in the environment. Connections to competent and caring adults, that's teachers in schools potentially. So if children connect to us as teachers and we are competent and caring, we can help them develop cognitive and self-regulation skills and positive views of themselves. And to a degree, we can overcome difficulties with their parents haven't actually been able to do that. So risk factors, though, do not predict negative outcomes, except for between 20 and 49% of the high-risk population. So amongst these groupings, the risk factors coming from a very, very bad background doesn't necessarily tell you the outcomes of the children, and in terms of whether they're going to be successful or not, because some children are resilient. And paradoxically, the protective processes in one context may prove to be risky in another. What does that mean? Well, as a child growing up, in some cases, the protective process that the child experiences may be more risky. So if you're a parent and you are living in a rundown area and you engage in democratic parenting, the child says, I want to be out late, what you should be saying is, no, you need to be in now, it's too dangerous out there. Whereas in other contexts, actually, democratic parenting would be a very positive process to engage in. So this is, what all this research tells us is, this is complex, and there is no simple way of being able to detect and determine who will be successful from what we observe. Some families, children which are very, very adverse, children do very well. They have high resilience, and other families were very similar. Children actually kind of drop out.
Chris, I'm just going to stop you here for a second, just to, you've now gave a ton of great information and a lot of stuff, and I just want to see if anyone has any questions for Chris up to this point. He's given a lot of detailed information and research based on some great researchers, and just, take a little break here. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask Chris? You can use the Q&A pane, or you can use shared notes. I put some information about some of the books and the authors that he referenced on the shared notes. But just also wanted to give a little bit of a language break if there are some people trying to read the slides and stuff as well. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I might, I might skip through some of this actually. Just get to the. There's a lot of stuff here you can read. Here's a whole slide full of, which I took from somebody else actually. from the Young Foundation, and this slide refers to again a lot of research which you can follow up. You don't really need me to go through that. But it gets the maybe bit. We've got a Q&A here. Question. So no, I haven't. I can't actually. Okay, no, I haven't got a Q&A. It's not bad. So maybe we could teach or enable people's skills, people's social skills. And from this, we can drive improving exam results from a different direction, that is from the pupils themselves. And if we do this, we can actually make people better able to cope with their lives. So the question is, well, how? How would you do that in school, given that you've got to do everything else? Given that we're not psychologists, we need to focus on reporting skills to pupils and aiding them in acquiring these. And which skills? Well, there is a book there I'm referring to, which is, if you want to know about skills, that book is the Bible. But it's far too extensive for our purposes. And if we talked about 24 skills, who in a classroom can actually manage that? I don't think really many of us that could.
Chris, we did have a question along those same lines. So how can we reinvent teachers' roles? So I don't know if you're going to get to that.
I get to that, yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Okay. So I'm saying, look, 3 things we're going to focus on in classrooms. 1, grit, that is perseverance, the ability to keep going. We all know students that give up. So we need to actually think about, well, how can we talk to them about keeping going? And the second one is self-management, the ability to manage yourself appropriately. And the third one is simply the ability to work with others. So it's a very simple kind of ask here. We're not asking for 3,000 skills, 200 skills, just asking for 3 skills. And to do this, I think there's a kind of 2-stage program, really. One is to think about, first of all, the wider culture of the school, and then to think about a specific program, potentially a whole school model. So in terms of the wider school culture, we need to get our wider messages aligned. What is the message that the school is trying to give to children? I like the KIP model of work hard, be nice. It's very simple. But when you go into schools, you don't see very often messages around the schools about this is what we do here. You see sometimes quite long-winded statements which have been written by teachers about, in this school we believe in hard work and whatever, academic achievement, yeah. But if you ask people, can you tell me the 5 or 6 values of the school which are put up in the reception, mostly people don't tend to remember them. So they have to think about, well, how could we have some really smart messages along the walls that we've all got? And most walls in most schools are pretty empty. And how can we tell pupils that their skills will improve? A woman called Carol Dweck found that, if you tell people in school that they're going to get better in any way, 12% of the population do. Now, if you told children in every class, in every school around the world every day, today you will improve in this lesson, we will see an automatic improvement in about 12% or more of children. So actually telling people that they are not fixed in terms of their abilities, but actually they change day to day, hour to hour, and generally they improve, actually people tend to improve that. People tend to believe that, and therefore they do improve. So we then need to be consistent in this in terms of thinking about, well, how do we get our message across every lesson? And how do we have some simple signage across the school? And then also, if these 3 key skills are important, maybe we need to say that across the school. Maybe we need to write that up in some places and say, we're really interested in grit, self-management, and your ability to work with other people. And what about making links with work and people? How will we do that? How will we perhaps use the school's walls to message these ideas, to actually have a wall about work, or a wall about money, or a wall about morality, or a wall about love, and begin to get children to put some ideas on these walls and then begin to connect them together in terms of, well, the important things in the school that we're looking at are these values which we want you to have. Because if you've got these values, these abilities, then you will actually do well. So create the idea the school is interested in the human aspects of its people, not just exam results. And a teacher training program, to answer that specific question, in social skills and how to exercise them would begin to help this. So, in terms of the way in which you talk to teachers, actually talking to them about, well, we're really interested in these skills. Just by actually signposting that and talking about it, you will find the skills improve. In terms of a specific program, you can try something for yourself, or you can try something in a lesson, which is talk about the skills which you think are important and actually ask children to engage in improving these skills. But if you want to do a wider program, you can take a year group. There's a grit survey available from the online, which is free, which is 12 questions online. And you can give these questions to the children. You can then analyze which children have got perseverance skills and which haven't. And once you've then got two groups, you can begin to talk to them about how you might make a difference.
Chris, is there places that they can get these types of surveys?
Yeah, there is. I'll send you a link. I'll send you a link to that. It's all available. It's free. It's online.
Okay.
Online link.
And a lot of these links, everybody, I'll put on the discussions on the Partners in Learning Network as well, so that you can go back and reference it. So sorry for interrupting there, Chris. I just wanted to.
But these are very simple tools, and the questions. There's an 8-question test and a grit survey. Once you've used that, you can begin to, with a class or the year group or the whole school, you begin to discriminate between, well, here we've seen how some children who seem to have these skills of perseverance and other children who don't. So are these the kinds of children we expected to have perseverance skills, or are they children we didn't expect to have perseverance skills? So why is that? The other children in your school are the ones with high adverse childhood experiences. These are behaviorally difficult, challenged children. I'm not going to talk about these children in particular tonight, but there are other approaches, and I'll send you a link, mindfulness programs, which you might want to look at for them as well. But that's a kind of whole different area of engagement. But for the children we're talking about tonight, once you've identified which children don't have skills of perseverance, you might begin to think about this whole idea of feedback. So there was a book out in 2008 called Nudge, which said most of us have no idea how we're doing day to day because nobody gives us any feedback. So if we can simply give people feedback, they tend to improve their behavior and their performance. So we actually could begin to think about how we could give children feedback in terms of soft skills. So what I'm saying is that we don't need to have a lesson which says, today we're going to practice perseverance, today we're going to practice self-management, or today we're going to practice how to get along with people. These are skills you kind of learn and you pick up, and there are also attitudes which you acquire. But what children don't have is actually feedback on these. So if we could actually begin to feed back to children in terms of how they're doing in these areas, then we will see, because I've done this, we will see an improvement in the percentage of children who've got perseverance, the percentage of children who are managing themselves successfully, and the percentage of children who are actually working well within groups. And therefore, actually, the numbers of children we have to worry about in school will diminish, because the idea is that the children do the work, not the teachers. The teachers are there as the guides to help the children do the work. They're not doing the work for the children, but in many, many places, today we see the teachers doing too much of the work. What we're trying to say is this is a way by which we can get more children engaged and get them to understand that if they work at things, even though they've had setbacks, they will improve. So I will send you the handout of a feedback sheet which you can actually provide for children in terms of at the end of every lesson. You could score the lesson, so children get automatically, when they come into lesson, there's 40 children in the lesson, they all get a point for grit, and they get a point for self-management, and they get a point for working with one another. So what you need to, so their average score in that lesson will be 3. Those children that don't show those skills, you make a note of. So you take the points away from those children. They'll be quite small. So this is a means of reporting where the teacher doesn't have to do very much themselves. Now, if you want to extend that, you can extend it to a year group, or you can do it across a whole school. You can put the information onto an Excel spreadsheet, and you can get the spreadsheet to begin to actually give a score. And you can then begin to review the score daily, weekly, or however often you want it to. And you can also begin to, as I suggest, give a training activity to students to help them improve. So you may say, well, there's a certain group of students here who aren't doing too well in terms of self-management or perseverance. So how can we help them? And one area we can help in, it seems, from the research is habit formation. So habits, routines, are the way in which we manage our lives. And many children lack these routines. We know that parents who send their children to learn the piano, or learn art, or learn ballet, or learn dance, or learn games, swimming, whatever it happens to be, the advantages these children have are not that they're particularly good at those things, although they may be, but actually they learn a routine, and they then apply that routine to their academic work. So those parents see a reward in terms of the children understanding that they need to try hard, they need to keep going, they need to persevere in order to be successful at something. So you might think about how you could take a group of students who've got 4 perseverance skills and teach them something which has got really nothing to do with academic standards. Teach them sport, play games where they're on time, or uniform accuracy, or cleanliness, or after school work, or fitness, anything which is a routine, which is where you're establishing a routine which is repeated time and time again, and where they do gradually actually develop some competence. And constantly explain what we're doing. What we're trying to do is to improve your self-management, your perseverance, and your ability to get along with other people. Simply by talking about this, you will find students will improve. Simply by talking about it. So there's no kind of mystery behind this. And if you look at, this is an interesting slide about the mental health spectrum. So this is a way of looking at a population in terms of mental health. And at one end, on the right-hand side, over here, you've got people flourishing. They're doing really well. Here's sort of moderate mental health, here they're languishing, and here they've got mental disorder. So could we apply this to the kind of school population? And this is what we're saying in terms of mental health is if you just move that line, this line here, you could improve the percentage of people that are flourishing. If we looked at the school population and talked about, we've got some flourishing children, we've got some moderate children, we've got some languishing children, we've got some children who are doing very well, how could we begin to shift those numbers? How could we begin to understand those numbers? How could we begin to look at that as a problem? And how could we begin to talk to these groupings and begin to move them in one direction? And in terms of mental health treatment. It's the talking cure, which is kind of number one. You know, just talking to people about the situation they're in is a means by which you give them the ability to slowly move forward. And for some people it works very well, and for other people it doesn't work so well. But there's no magic way of curing people with mental health problems. Equally, there's no magic way of making more people flourishing in terms of a community. So the question is, if we begin to talk about these things, we might begin to shift perspectives. The operational definition of flourishing is actually quite interesting, because this is from a mental health perspective. This is exactly what we need in schools. These are the kinds of features we wish to see: positive emotion, engagement, having a meaning to one's life, self-esteem, optimism, resilience, vitality, developing competence, emotional stability, and positive relationships. And again, you know, thinking about those empty walls around the school, you know, we might actually put up some signage and some stuff which says what we want in this school is people to experience these features of the good life, because we think this is the way in which the good life is kind of developed. If you've got these features, you're likely to be leading a pretty good life. So, as I keep saying, the key is not standing up and trying to teach people this stuff, but it's actually talking about it. And the process of teaching is actually the process of talking about it and highlighting it, because children pick up on the fact. I was talking to a few children not so long ago in a school in England, and they were saying this school is just an exam factory. That's all they want out of us. And I thought, yeah, that's the message you've got. Nobody said to you, there's a much bigger perspective here about becoming a person. And you know, these are the kinds of features which I need to focus on in my life and apply. And the teachers here constantly point us in those directions. And in terms of feedback in lessons, they're talking about, well, yeah, it's been a pretty positive lesson. We've seen lots of engagement. I hope you understood what's going on here. I hope you feel positive about what's happened. I hope you're optimistic about the lesson tomorrow and optimistic about yourself. I know some of you found this quite difficult, but hopefully you'll stick at it and be resilient. And hopefully you've developed some competencies and you've had some good relationships in the lesson with other people. And just, you know, just in that sentence, you've actually woven together a number of the features you want to see. Now, doing that once in one lesson is going to make no difference. Doing it, you know, in the 10,000 lessons that children have during the course of their school career might make a huge difference to them. So you might also think about how you can begin to work with parents to get you involved in this whole process of habit formation. And this is about sometimes talking to parents who've got bad habits themselves about how they need to develop some positive habits with their children. And you might think about how you know, again, according to your context, how you might develop a PowerPoint to show parents what might be possible. You know, you can start with children tidying their bedroom. You can start with children helping with chores in the house, and having kind of rule structures which are understood, but not harsh rule structures. This is quite difficult to, as you know, to teach. But it's something which, again, you could put across in a meeting with parents, perhaps over the course of an hour, and get some dialogue going with parents about, well, how can we suggest these ideas? Because again, if we can reinforce the messages in terms of habit formation from an early age, then children will do better in terms of these areas. So in terms of a wider culture, it would be good to try to align this. You know, think about how does the school communicate these kinds of messages of soft skills? How do we communicate this as teachers in this school continuously? It doesn't have to be very complicated. And again, use walls. You know, we've all got walls. We've all got paint. We've all got paper we can stick on walls. We've all got resources called children who we can actually get involved with us. So use those walls for messaging and try and keep it lively and try and keep it simple. And think about how you can consistently feed back these issues to students so that they are aware that these are the kinds of skills which actually will make them successful longer term. Okay, so that's the end of the talk. It's been a bit of a romp through. I'd be happy to look at some of the questions.
Chris, there's a number of questions in the Q&A. And then also, if you look on the shared notes, a few of the leaders have talked about, how they have to focus on assessments, and there's a lot of other things that are taking priority. And so maybe you a little bit about that. I think you had some great ideas that, just putting messages on walls and things like that, I think that don't take a lot of distractions, but maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay, I'm just trying to decide where to, just looking down the shared notes section, trying to look at the questions down from. Okay, how do you teach? I'm just going to go through these. Down from Singapore. How do you teach parents that failing is good to develop students' resilience? Well, I was slightly. Was that Maria and Lorraine? I was slightly skeptical of the Seligman kind of view, which is they've got to know complete failure, and I recognise the fact that parents today are going to try and shield their children from failure to a certain degree, but I think we have to kind of try and say this with a smile on our faces, really, that we're not talking about complete failure. We're talking about if they learn that if they fail something, they need to actually then come back and try and overcome it. That's the key. It's pretty difficult to put that across when we're not face to face, but it comes down to the kind of interpersonal skills you've got, I guess. And to recognise that we're not saying the child is a complete failure. We're saying you're not being successful at something. Try again. Let's see if we can improve. And that's about mostly what teachers do as well. I think our basis for today's discussion is when teaching common items in this discussion. Okay, long-term plan. It's impossible, and governments are always changing laws and programs. Yeah, Fernandez, I don't disagree with that. You can always blame governments, but actually there's a slow move. There's a number of organizations now trying to influence government to say, you've got to pay attention to these skills because a number of countries are churning out children with a lot of academic qualifications, but they don't have the skills they need to succeed in these economies we've got today, which are driven by the service sector. And I think that teachers do have autonomy in terms of the way they can talk to children, in terms of saying, these skills are really important and these are ones which we value here, so let me tell you how I think you're doing. Just looking down through the shared notes now. Habits of mind, yes. Okay, lots of very useful stuff here. How do you engage parents in a school where parents aren't interested, too busy in some cases, have language barrier, culture barrier to teach the school? Well, having worked in such schools myself, you've got to start somewhere. And, we started with pizza evenings, which is not that unusual, and starting with people we know, and then trying to build up a community slowly over time so that we got more and more people engaged. And we did employ some psychologists to work with parents as well to talk about the fact that the difficulties they've got are amenable if they want the help. And some parents want the help and some parents don't. But I accept that you're never going to win everybody over. How can we reinvent teachers' role? Well, I guess it's not for us to reinvent the teacher's role. It's this is partly mandated by states, and the question is really, well, how can we influence government to recognise that the role, the issue of soft skills is absolutely critical to academic success, but also to success in terms of citizenship. In terms of which mindfulness programs would you just recommend, I think. Okay, I'll send you some. There are a number in your organizations which offer mindfulness programs. What mindfulness is simply it tries to teach people several things. First of all, about how their minds kind of operate between the logical and the emotional, and also which state they're in at any one time. But it also tries to get you to pay attention to yourself in the wider context that you were in. So I'll send some stuff to you about that. It's quite complex. Alina has written a question here. You alluded to the fact that children should have the opportunity to learn, to fail, and I agree. Has this implications for teachers using positive feedback excessively? Does praise actually prevent people succeeding? I think the answer there is actually we should be always saying what we're interested in is perseverance. We need to, some of you have not done so well, but actually you need to try again. I'll be talking to those people individually, and this is what we need to actually have a go at. And it's that whole language of perseverance which we're trying to build. How do you teach? Oh, I don't know. The second question was, Eodel, how do you think this model would work on a school with large population and other deficiencies, particularly in developing country like Nigeria, where I teach over 700 students in a week and over 100 in a class? Listen. Right. Well, I think it doesn't matter whether you've got 100 or 1,000, because actually, in terms of signposting, what is important in life, not just this lesson, what is important is how hard you work, how hard you keep working, how you manage yourself, and how you relate to other people. These things are more important than school. They're important in school, but they're also important in work, and they're important in life. And being in this school today is going to help you improve in those areas. So that's how I would simply signpost that. And then I would, in terms of the feedback which we give to students, we would actually come back and explain to children, how we thought they were doing against the context of those social skills. So simply by referring to it, you will see, as I said before, improvements. Okay. Any other questions?
Does anybody have any comments, any concerns to share with Chris? Chris gave us some great ideas, all of which I'm going to post on the discussions right after this call, so you can go back, in the next hour or so and look it up. But Chris, this was very insightful on.
I would say, this is quite difficult to start with in terms of getting your head around. But actually what we're talking about here is very simple. What I'm saying is if you want those exam results, try focusing on those social skills and try focusing on actually talking about the skills that you view to be important. And I can send you some stuff, some additional materials where some tools you can develop if you want to, which are slightly more sophisticated. You can give feedback, and we developed systems of giving feedback using SharePoint. You may not want to do that. It gives you an average score in terms of how you're doing across the week in terms of perseverance, grit, self-management, or working with other students. And it can show your score versus the average in the class, in the year group, in the school. And most people like to be average, at least. So this does have an effect on people. So you're not actually doing anything other than providing information to actually improve performance. So people will pay attention to that. But it may be difficult for you to think about a whole school system where you talk to everybody. You just don't have the resources to do that necessarily. If you've got in your context the ability to use technology to provide feedback, that's great. If you don't, well, simpler systems in terms of just using language for the whole class or looking at subgroups of children and then providing them with information in terms of how they're doing. I'm thinking about, okay, well, maybe there's this group here we need to actually focus on. How can we develop some routines here? Or thinking about just school routines. How do we develop a routine at the beginning of class? It doesn't really matter what it is. It's just the fact that it is a routine and a habit. And that habit is then helps the child understand, oh yes, okay, I need to kind of stick at stuff. I need to manage myself effectively. I need to do the things that are asked of me. Okay. Okay, Mary, I think we've reached the end of the question session. So
great. All right. Well, actually, we're done a little early today, so
okay.
give you some time back, everybody. But Chris, thank you very much for sharing this. Like I said, we'll get everybody the information, and you'll have a recording of this as well. So thanks everybody for joining us today at this virtual university. It's always great new content.
And if you want to know more, just send me an email, and I'm happy to chat on Skype or however, and I can send you some materials. Okay.
Great. Well, thanks everybody, and have a great morning, day, evening, wherever you are in the world, and appreciate you attending this virtual university. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. You may now disconnect from the event.